Hopefully everybody can hear the video and see the video. This is the lesson for geometry. We are in chapter 2 for section 2. Chapter 2, section 2. This one has to do with these things called logical statements. They're also known as conditional statements. And when you go to college, there are classes that are entirely based around these types of things. It's called logic. But we're just going to kind of give you a taste of it right now and some of the terminology that it's involved. The basic statement is called a conditional statement, and it goes something like this. If something is true, then something else is true. Now, these two statements have names. The name that the part that follows the word if is called the hypothesis, and the part that follows the word then is called the conclusion. So this is the form that the conditional statement takes. It's called if-then form. And again, I've defined the hypothesis as the part of the statement that follows the if. And the conclusion is the part that follows the word then. All right. So, I'm going to skip this one. All right, so I'm going to give you an example of an if-then statement. So this is my original statement. If I have a job, then I make money. Now, sometimes we kind of mess around with these statements and flip them around and look at what they would look like in another way. One of these is the converse. The converse flips the conclusion and the hypothesis. Flips the conclusion and the hypothesis. Okay, so if this was my original statement, my hypothesis is I have a job, and my conclusion is I make money. So if I flip those two, the converse would be if I make money, then I have a job. The inverse of the original statement basically it says that both things are not true. So makes both the hypothesis and conclusion not true. It's called negating or negation when we say that something's not true. I didn't define it formally, but that's basically what that means. So let's do the inverse over here. Okay, so we're going to go back to the original statement. Don't look at this, just look at the original statement. The inverse of if I have a job, then I make money. If we say that both of those things are not true, we would say if I do not have a job, then I do not make money. The contrapositive, okay, is the converse and inverse of the original statement. Okay, so basically we're just going to do both of these things to the original statement. So the converse would flip them around so that it would say, if I make money, then I have a job. And the inverse makes them both not true. So the contrapositive of the original statement flips the hypothesis and the conclusion, and then says that they are both not occurring. So it would be, if I do not make money, then I do not have a job. Alrighty. Equivalent statements. Equivalent statements are two statements where they both have to be true or they both have to be false together. They're kind of bound together in their truth. You can't have one part that's true and the other part that's false. Perpendicular lines. Now, I'm not quite sure why this is defined in this section. I don't see anything on it in our notes, so I'm going to skip that. And then finally, the biconditional statement. Okay. So, the words if and only if. Well, we can make a statement using if and only if when two things have to exist together. For example, let's say that if we started off with the phrase, a right angle has exactly 90 degrees. Okay, we could write that as a biconditional statement by saying the angle is a right angle. Here's the middle part. If and only if it has exactly 90 degrees. So it's kind of like taking a definition and rephrasing it so that you're using that phrase in the middle, if and only if. So another biconditional statement might be, two angles are supplementary if and only if they add up to 180 degrees. Or a shape is a triangle if and only if it has three sides. So basically anything that's a definition, anything that has to be true about something, you can rephrase it and make it a biconditional statement by simply including if and only if in the center of the statement. So if I wanted to rephrase this, all vertebrates have a backbone, and I wanted to write it in if-then form, I would say, if let's see, I was going to say an animal, but I suppose we're vertebrates too. So I'm going to say if a living thing has a backbone, then it is a vertebrate. Now I could have written that the other way around. I could have said, if a living thing is a vertebrate, then it has a backbone. Either one of those are a good example of how to turn a statement of truth into an if-then statement. All right. So you can do that with these types of statements as well. I'm going to skip this one. Basically, I could say, if it's a triangle, then it has 3 sides, or if a shape has 3 sides, then it's a triangle, something like that. This one, people less than 12 years old are children. I could say, if a person is less than 12 years old, then it's a child. Or I could say, if a person is a child, then they are less than 12 years old. Something like that. Let's see. I could say, on this one, I rewrote the question. The original statement is, a straight angle is an angle that measures exactly 180 degrees. So I could say, if an angle is a straight angle, then it measures exactly 100 degrees, or if an angle measures exactly 180 degrees, then it's a straight angle. That's one way to write it in if-then form, or two ways to do it. Example number 4, a baseball game is delayed when there is a heavy rain. So I would say, if there is heavy rain, then a baseball game is delayed. Now this one has the word when in it, which is something that qualifies a statement. It basically means that this is the if part. So when you see words like if and when, that's going to precede the hypothesis. When is just another way to say if. So really this one would be only able to be written as if then, as if there is a heavy rain, then the baseball game is delayed. You wouldn't actually do it the other way around because of the word when. It really means if. Okay, so let's do a little bit more practice like I did on the first page. I have an original statement, I have the converse of that original statement, I have the inverse of the original statement, and then I have the contrapositive of the original statement. It's really, really helpful to practice with this, so we're going to do a page of practice. Alright, so Olympians are athletes. So if I wanted to write that in if-then form, I would say, if you are an Olympian, then you are an athlete. Okay, so the converse just flips that around. Okay, so it would be, if you are an athlete, then you are an Olympian. The inverse of the original statement basically negates both the first and second statement. So the original, in original form, would be, if you are an Olympian, then you're an athlete. The inverse negates both of these things. It says, if you're not an Olympian, then you're not an athlete. All right. And then finally, the contrapositive does both of these things to the original statement. It flips them around and it negates the statements. So the contrapositive would be, if you are not an athlete, then you are not an Olympian. Well, the other thing they'd like us to do is decide whether these statements are true or false. It doesn't mean that we've written them wrong if we say that they're false. It's just we're going to look at what we've created and decide logically if it's a true or false statement. Okay, the original statement that I wrote, if you are an Olympian, then you're an athlete. Yeah, I'd say if you're going to the Olympics, then you'd have to be an athlete, so that would be true. The converse, if you're an athlete, then you're Olympian. No, just because I'm an athlete doesn't mean I'm going to go to the Olympics, so that would be false. Inverse, if you're not an Olympian, okay, so I'm not going to the Olympics, then that must mean I'm not an athlete. No, just because I didn't make it into the Olympics doesn't mean I'm not an athlete, so I would say that's false. And then finally the contrapositive. If you're not an athlete, then you're not an Olympian. Well, yeah, if I'm not an athlete, I'm definitely not going to go to the Olympics, so that's true. So, I'd encourage you to make up your own if-then statement, something like, if I like Usher, then I am cool, something like that. And the converse of that would be, flipping it around, if I'm cool, then I like Usher, something like that. And practice all of these, actually. Practice making your if-then statement, writing the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of that would be a really good idea for good practice.